How's it going, gamers? Welcome to the dojo. Today, we're going to be unboxing the PlayStation Portal. Speaking of background, we also have the PlayStation 5 Pro. But you're going to have to subscribe, check that video out separately for the unboxing and first impressions. We're going to focus on the easier thing to unbox, which is the PlayStation Portal. Pick these both up today, and admittedly, the Portal is something that when it first came out, I know there's a lot of controversy around it, given that it didn't have all the features at launch, and it was more of a kind of remote player, and still is a remote player for the PlayStation. However, recent updates allow you to stream your games without having to rely, I believe, necessarily on the PlayStation fully, if I'm not mistaken. So, interested to see post the first couple months of its release. Maybe coming up on a year now. Actually, I'm not sure how long it's been out. And post software updates where it's actually at. I was also hesitant to get this because I, have a Steam Deck. I have a bunch of various handhelds and rely on those pretty heavily, at least for mobile gaming, and those tend to be my go-to on traveling and trips. But with the numerous PlayStation 5s, now the third one I've added to the collection, I partially decided to get this as one, the completionist collection in me wanting to have the variations of consoles. That's definitely a thing. But two, because, I've played a lot of games on PlayStation primarily for the achievement components, a lot of single player games for the platinum trophy runs and things like that. And there are times where, again, despite having the multiple PlayStations, where I want to play in a more mobile setting, a more casual setting, whether it's in bed, on a couch, what have you. And sometimes that's not, in front of the TV or on the TV, and the Portal is going to allow me to do that. So let's go ahead and flip to the overhead camera here as we get situated and take a look at the Portal. So as of right now, the Portal does come in the classic white, which I got it here, and then it comes in the Midnight Black edition. Looks like it's in. Oh, they even have the Marvel logo here on the back. I guess that's just because of the Spider-Man promo. But yeah, I think a lot more people were more interested in something like this when that recent kind of firmware update allowing for better remote play functionality came out. Earlier reviews were very kind of hit or miss. And it's definitely a handheld for a very specific user, right? You're getting this if you're in the Sony ecosystem and, want to kind of experience gameplay on the go. They literally call it a remote player here. Unboxing-wise, just very satisfying, just very sleek, slips out. The other edition they do have of this is the 30th anniversary edition. I considered getting that for a while. I tried to get it at launch. It was tough to get my hands on, unfortunately. Now you can get it, through aftermarket and scalpers and resellers and whatnot. But honestly, at this point, I just opted for the traditional white model. Okay, before we get to that, we have a couple, the standard accessories and cable in here. So let's just get that out of the way. You have what seems like, I'm assuming is a charging cable. I'm assuming this is going to be USB-C. Yeah. Just a standard USB-C cable. And then looks like you have some literature, and that's it. Super simple unboxing experience. You have the player itself and the charging cable. But that keeps things easy. So I can go ahead and put this all back in the box here. I just noticed the pull tab has the button logos on it there. So with that allows us to look at the Portal itself here. So just go ahead and pull this out. And essentially, it is just like a PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, which I am actually a pretty big fan of, sandwiched between the screen. And it feels just like that. It feels like an extended PlayStation 5 controller. Now, I'm sure you've seen videos, people can, you can achieve this with something like a backbone or, other accessories for cheaper. As far as a handheld goes, this is only coming in at about right under $200, and you can sometimes even get it on sale for cheaper than that. So again, this is not independent hardware. It's really focusing on a Steam Deck experience to run everything off of this console. A lot of it is relying on that streaming or remote play. But here you have it. Again, you have the DualSense-like controller there, just kind of cut in half, and then instead of a touchpad, you have the touch screen. And you have some power buttons, volume buttons there, and looks like another button for what I'm assuming is, actually I'm not sure, not 100% sure what that logo is for, but let's go ahead and get the satisfying peel out the way. And with that, let's go ahead and power it on. I'm assuming it comes with a bit of charge, but let's see here. Did I not hold it down long enough? And then with that, we're going to go ahead and download the update, read all the agreements as always, and then let it update here. So the speakers seem like they're built into, where's the speaker? I'm assuming there's like back shell. It's like coming out of this shell right here is my assumption. This doesn't look like there's like a speaker grill. Outside of that, I mean, it's pretty standard. Charging port is in the back here. Is that a, seems like a 3.5 audio jack right there next to it. But I mean, again, given it's a remote player, the hardware itself is pretty basic. Screen is much larger than I had anticipated, which is nice. Again, coming from something like being more used to like a Steam Deck, while still feeling like decent weight, not too heavy, not too light in hand, and having that comfortable kind of controller feel. Right, so at this point, I use my iPhone to scan the QR code. If you have the PlayStation app to just kind of automatically sign you in, you can do things like, if you want to allow for data connection, you can pair your PS5 right away. And I'm gonna, can I skip that, or do I have to do it right now? Okay, so a bit later, this has been paired to the new PlayStation 5, just so I can get everything set up. Find lock here. I paired it, put the new PS5 Pro into rest mode, and apparently that's all we need to do. Ready to play. It's actually perfect timing because the controller on my PS5 Pro just died. But essentially here, at least right now, I am connected to my PS5 remotely here, and I can actually see it right now responding as I interact here on my portal. Speaker, not too bad. I don't have it pumping here. I didn't really adjust the volume either, I guess. Just maxed out to see what it sounds like. I know on your guys' end, colors might be a little off because you're just seeing it from the perspective of the camera. It's actually a little too loud now. The volume rocker is like in a precarious place, at least for me. Like I have to to reach it. Just feels a little, I have to reach kind of over. And then it feels pretty native. Analog stick's a little bit smaller here, but again, for the most part, same exact experience you'd be getting on a PS5. Okay, so here's the thing. It is the next day, and I'm at my work office this morning. Last night, spent a lot of time just tinkering with my PS5 Pro and getting all that set up, that I honestly didn't get to dive back into that of the PlayStation Portal. So I figured, why not test it in an actual remote setting when I'm not at home and I'm actually using it in part the way it may be intended, to see how it functions over Wi-Fi when I'm remote. Okay, so I'm going to turn the cloud streaming beta on, and I believe with this you should be able to, so you can just swap between, like, I can connect to the PS5, or I can go to cloud streaming, which essentially is just streaming directly from Sony servers. So it's like the equivalent of, like, I'm sure they have like just server farms, essentially running all of these games. And it is a beta, so these titles are pretty limited, but you'll notice just off the top, there's a good amount of like classic titles. So you have like Siphon Filter, you have Twisted Metal and Twisted Metal 2, some OG PlayStation 1 titles, as well as looks like some PS2 titles, and I imagine PS3 and so on. So, and obviously the biggest thing with games like this, or remote playing, streaming from the cloud, is going to be latency. Like how bad or good is that latency? in terms of response time. So outside of those initial stutters, I haven't had a lose connection yet. Latency wise, honestly, it doesn't feel terrible. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely playable, especially for like specific titles. Obviously, I'm gonna have to test out like the heavier, probably like FPS based titles to really kind of see, in games like that where reaction time and all that probably makes more sense and more of an impact. But for more like cinematic single player games, which honestly I use my PlayStation in general for a lot, this experience is not that bad. And with that, gamers, full circle moment here. Kind of wrapping up my initial first impression thoughts on this after having it for about 24 hours. I was spent a lot of my time messing with the PlayStation Pro that I got at the same time, so maybe it's a little unfair to compare one of the, top high ends of the PlayStation 5 lineup to what is essentially just a remote streaming device for your PlayStation 5s. But a couple things. One, this form factor was much bigger than I thought. Like, this screen is massive. And I know the design is kind of quirky and it's essentially just a giant PlayStation 5 controller, but I actually really like it. And I think if they actually chose to have gone the dedicated hardware route and not make this just like a remote streamer, I could probably get used to this. I will say the screen is massive. It's, I believe, a 1080p screen. I wish it shipped with a case, just like out of the box, because this thing is just massive. Having to take it to the office today, I was kind of worried about the screen and the rigidity of it, because it is not just like a solid block. It's just the screen in the middle with the handles on the side. But for all the quirks and, design language that the PlayStation 5 got, this essentially is just an extension of that. It feels like a PlayStation game and experience because it is just a DualSense controller. So that kind of familiarity is there, translating from the, controller itself to the handheld. And with that, testing out the cloud streaming experience, testing out the streaming experience just normally via the portal, a lot of it comes down to, no surprise, the internet connection. Like, that is going to be the driving force between what your experience is with this and, what you get out of it. I haven't tested this obviously in the last 24 hours in like a actual public setting, like traveling abroad or, in a hotel Wi-Fi scenario where you don't really control the parameters of your internet. I've controlled it I've used it in two scenarios where my home internet, which is gigabit, has pretty fancy mesh system, and the office, which also is gigabit and has, very fancy mesh enterprise grade Wi-Fi and whatnot. So was able to get really stable performance there. However, there were times where I saw dips and kind of, stuttering, especially in the cloud beta when I was first testing that just for streaming from the Sony servers. To even here at home, I didn't experience like stuttering or lost connection, but again, you are streaming from your PlayStation to this 1080p screen, so I'm assuming it's just kind of downscaling that for this experience. But notably, like artifacting and just quality experiences on games like Final Fantasy VII, Stellar Blade, 2K25, which was surprising because at that point I assumed maybe it was something with the network, even though everything else on the network is solid and stable. Or I wasn't too sure of like how the quality and the settings on the PlayStation itself affects that of the portal. For example, on the PS5 Pro, I was messing around with all of the new Pro graphics settings for certain games to get 4K resolution, better frame rate. But when you essentially remote play in via the portal, it just retains those settings, I should say, and pushes them over to the portal. Again, assumingly just downscaling it, but I wasn't sure how that affects the experience. Like, am I better off just setting it to performance mode when I'm playing on the portal? And I wish it kind of knew that context of like when the PlayStation is being remoted into, so that if I switch the graphics settings and then I go pick up my controller and decide to play on the big screen, I don't have to revert those settings. But I guess that's the thing. I don't know if those settings even have any impact on here. I haven't done enough research. I know some of the Reddit threads I scoured said people were like, yeah, downscaling the resolution to 1080p and adjusting settings really affects your performance. You get better performance on your portal. Where others said no, it has no bearing and they don't touch anything on the PlayStation 5 itself. They just plan the portal and, it is what it is. So I'm going to have to do a deeper dive into that in the reviews. However, if you want to chime in down in the comments below for fellow portal owners, would love to hear about it. But yeah, I can see this again being an extension of my PlayStation 5 gameplay, especially when I'm achievement hunting single player games, and just kind of like the specific kind of games that I play. I think there are times where, yes, I want the full graphical experience and the fidelity, and I'm a huge fan of that, and that's why I have things like the giant OLED back here behind me to really experience all those pixels. But there are other times where, I think more mindlessly, or certain game titles I just want to play and enjoy, that I don't really need the best of the best quality. And I think that's where cloud streaming, or being able to just portal into my PlayStation from upstairs or the bedroom or what have you, is going to be useful. But the truth of the matter is, we're going to have to see what's the actual staying power of this device. Is this something that only gets used now and again? Is this something that sits in a cabinet or a closet or what have you? Or is this something that gets more daily uses amidst all of the other gadgets and gizmos I have around me? So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for the full review of this that's to come, with some time of usage of this. Love to hear your thoughts on the PlayStation Portal. Leave it down in the comments below. And as always, gamers, thanks for watching.